All right, and while we wait, could I ask which departments you guys are from?
I'm in the Department of Psychology.
Okay, all right, nice to meet you.
And myself, Department of Health Science and Human Ecology.
Great. And I think we have some people who just joined us. Teresa Morris. Okay, another health science, and Benjamin Becerra. Hello.
Hi.
And welcome. So which department are you from?
Information and Decision Sciences.
Okay, great. All right, and Teresa Morris, which department are you from?
Hi, I'm from the School of Social Work.
Okay, all right, well, welcome everybody. So I will go ahead and get started. I think Ariana Hun is joining us. I think she's from anthropology, yes?
Yeah.
All right, welcome. Thanks for joining us. So basically, I'm going to go over, this will be very nuts and bolts, and feel free to stop me at any time if you have any questions or comments. But last year, the Graduate Council passed Thesis, Project, Dissertation Committee Policy and Guidelines. So this kind of will convey all of that information to you. I sent the document to you guys by email this morning, just so you have it. So, you know, if you want to read it on your own time, that's fine. But I'm going to go over, hopefully, the content of that document in this meeting. So you guys will be familiar with those new guidelines. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. And then I'm going to open up a PowerPoint that will sort of take us through the presentation. But like I said, you know, feel free to stop me at any time. You know, I don't think that this is going to take the full hour or anything like that. Or, you know, you can wait and ask questions or make comments at the end. Okay, I'm going to get started. Okay, can everybody see my screen? All right, perfect.
Yes.
So I have well, actually, let me go back. I have a cartoon there. I don't know if you guys can see it. The endless cycle. So we make corrections, the student makes the edits, you know, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Off we go to the races to get the thesis, project, or dissertation completed. Anyway, I thought it was kind of cute. Let's see. So moving right along. So basically what we'll talk about in this meeting is what the function of a thesis, project, or dissertation committee is at CSUSB. And, you know, we'll sort of talk about the policies and guidelines for serving on a thesis, project, or dissertation committee. So it should answer these questions. What's the function of a thesis, project, or dissertation committee at CSUSB? And are there policies and guidelines for serving on thesis, project, or dissertation committees? So the answer to the second question is yes. And these were developed by the Graduate Council last academic year and passed on the 1st of June. So we haven't had university-wide policies and guidelines before now. So this is the first time that we've sort of had, you know, these policies and guidelines. Okay, so the function of a thesis, project, or dissertation committee is basically, you know, it has an established place in the academic world, and, you know, committee members play a huge role in the guidance and direction of graduate student research. So it's just an absolutely crucial function for any graduate student, you know, to have a highly qualified thesis, project, or dissertation committee. The chairperson has a more formal administrative relationship with the student, which is what we're going to talk about a little bit more as we go through this slideshow. And like I said, feel free to stop me at any time. Okay, so what is the structure of a thesis committee? So the Graduate Council decided that a thesis committee should be composed of a minimum of 2 members. A dissertation committee, on the other hand, should be composed of a minimum of 3 members. Now, different programs might have other requirements. So for instance, programs might decide that they have a minimum requirement of 3 members for a thesis or project committee. And if that's the case, they should publish those requirements, you know, in the bulletin, on their website, and any sort of guidebooks or handbooks that they have for their graduate programs. So if, you know, if the program is coming up with specific requirements, again, those, should be published and readily accessible to students and people who might be serving as committee members. All right. So committee members are generally tenure-line faculty. There are some exceptions, so we'll talk about that in a minute. But generally, they should be tenure-line faculty in the students program. And the committee chair should absolutely be from the students degree program. So we're going to talk about some exceptions to committee membership, in terms of other types of faculty members besides tenure-line faculty in the students program who might qualify for the committee. So FERP faculty may serve as a third reader. Now, of course, if somebody starts FERPing and they have a thesis student who they've already committed to, and they're chairing that committee, or they're a second member of the committee, they're perfectly, of course, encouraged to go ahead and finish that out. If FERP faculty, if they are serving on the committee at a time when they're actually not teaching, so they're on their semester off or whatnot, then they might be actually signed on as adjunct faculty for that particular term. But for faculty, in general, may serve as a third reader on a thesis committee. Non-tenure line faculty can also serve as third readers with the approval of the department chair. So this would include like part-time and adjunct faculty, retired program faculty, faculty from other programs or universities, or community professionals. So any of those people are welcome to serve on committees as third members of the committee.
No.
Okay. The doctoral degree, so in this document, the Graduate Council agreed that the doctoral degree had some extra guidelines. So the committee chair, again, has to be a faculty member in the doctoral program. And any member of the committee needs to possess the requisite knowledge and experience and discipline-based research, theory, and methodologies at the doctoral level. They also should have requirements, for doctoral dissertations in the discipline, and that they should have a demonstrated ability to direct others in research, which I think most faculty, all faculty of the doctoral program would have that sort of knowledge. Okay, was there a question? Okay, so I'm going to move right along. Okay, the other, I think, important thing to consider here is that, there should be an established sort of maximum for the number of theses, projects, and dissertations that an individual faculty member would supervise at the same time. So, so that, the department would come up with that number. So would 6 be a reasonable number that somebody would supervise at the same time? Would 3 be a reasonable number? So there should be some sort of established maximum and probably some sort of rationale for coming up with that maximum number. So graduate programs are encouraged to come up with, that maximum number of theses, projects, or dissertations that an individual faculty member would supervise at the same time. And also the department chair should ensure that, the committee chair, that the work of a committee chair is calculated as part of the faculty's regular workload. So this is something that committee chairs should talk to their department chairs about. So how is the work of serving as a committee chair, calculated into that required regular workload? So, there's some new formulas. I don't know if you guys and your colleges have discussed these new formulas for supervision classes generally. But, generally committee chairs for theses should receive like 0.5 WTU for each thesis that they serve on. So, but that's something to definitely discuss with the department chair to make sure that you're being compensated for the work that you're doing as a committee chair. Let's see. So the responsibilities of, the initial responsibility of thesis committee, thesis project or dissertation committee is to, meet with the student and talk about how feasible the topic is. You come up with a plan or a proposal. Some departments require students to develop a thesis proposal before starting the thesis, but at least there should be some approved plan before the student, takes off and starts working on that thesis project or dissertation. So yeah, the committee needs to basically approve that and then permit the student to proceed only after that approval has been made. So everybody's on the same page, that this is the plan, that the student is expected to follow this plan. This is the topic, and the student is expected to adhere to this topic. So then, yeah, so once the plan is made, it should be a formal document that's signed by the committee members, and then it should become part of the student's file in the department. So anybody could have access to that plan to know what was agreed on. So, and yeah, and signing the document signifies that the student has permission to proceed with the study as outlined in the plan. So everybody agrees to this plan, this topic, this is what we're getting ourselves into. Okay, any questions so far?
A question.
Sure.
Okay, as in terms of some institutions, and I'm new here,
Caroline,
starting this fall, but some institutions require that at least one member of a committee is from outside the program. Are there any sort of requirements or anything that hinders it, a committee member being from outside of the student's program or department?
No, all we're saying, and let me see if I can go back. So what the grad council agreed on, and of course, this document can be amended if people are, feel like it doesn't cover all the possibilities. So, we agree on a minimum of 2 members, that the chair should be from the student's degree program, absolutely.
Right.
And then otherwise, tenure, the faculty members serving on the committee should be tenure line faculty. And then, the second reader would typically be tenure line faculty in the student's program. And a third reader could be a faculty member from another program or even another university.
Okay.
Yeah, there's no requirement for that.
For like doctoral, usually I've seen it at the doctoral level, but it doesn't state that here either, so.
No, there's no requirement for that.
Okay.
All right, thanks for the question.
Caroline,
Yes.
sorry, I joined late. You might have covered this. Did you talk about outside the university? Are they part of the 3, or do we have to have 4 if we are inviting somebody? Let's say students are doing, I don't know, something, they're collecting data with Planned Parenthood of the Inland Empire. Supervisor or somebody there wants to serve. Do we count them as a 4th member? We place an outside committee member, and if we have an outside committee member in the picture, do we have to have 4 members whereby 3 are from Cal State and the outside committee member is the 4th? Or do we still have 3 members overall, including the outside agency committee member? Most of the time where students can access the data, sometimes they have that situation, oh yeah, we'll let you use this data, but make sure we're part of your committee.
I see, yeah. So the minimum for a thesis is 2 members. And then if you're gonna have a person from outside of the program, like a community professional, like Planned Parenthood, like you mentioned, that could be a 3rd reader on the thesis. So you wouldn't need 4, but you would need 3.
So the outside committee member has to be last?
Well, I mean, it's just a 3rd reader.
Oh, it doesn't matter.
But now the committee chair needs to be faculty in the student's program.
Okay.
So there is that stipulation that the chair would be
Okay.
a faculty member in the student's
Okay.
program. But, this person could be a 2nd or a 3rd reader. It's just, you would need to have 3 in that case.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Okay. Okay. Yeah, and then just to clarify, you said for adjunct faculty, when you say they're the third member, does that mean they're put number 3, or does it matter? They could be number 2 or number 3 for adjunct faculty.
They could be number 2 or number 3. The important thing is that the committee chair comes from the student's program, and that there's a second reader who's a tenure line faculty member.
Okay.
You know, whether you have that as the third or the second
Okay.
reader, it's okay. You just need to have a third reader if it's going to be like an adjunct faculty member, retired program faculty, faculty from another program or university, or community professional. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank you.
Okay, thanks, Salome. Let's see. So where was I? Yeah, so we talked about, you know, making the plan, signing off on the plan, and then, you know, that should be actually part of the student's record that's stored in the department office so that everybody has access to what was agreed on. So yeah, the committee is responsible also for assuring that the student is familiar with and has received copies of appropriate university policies concerning things like working with dangerous materials, laboratory and fieldwork safety, and maintenance of standards of quality, ethics, and professional performance. So we'll talk about IRB and IACUC in just a minute. But yeah, so making sure that people are familiar with IRB and IACUC policies at CSUSB, and I'll get to that in more detail in just a minute. So yeah, the committee determines also the adequacy of the bibliography. So the research that the student has done, is it adequate? Is it relevant? Is it current? You know, those kinds of things. The committee reviews and approves the methodology and any instrument or questionnaire used in data collection. So the committee has to approve that. The student can't kind of go rogue, but that has to be something that the committee agrees to. And committee members are responsible for reviewing and providing feedback in a timely manner. So we recommend no more than a 4-week turnaround for each committee member. So yeah, when you get a draft, you should get that back to the student within a 4-week time period. All right. I'll pause for a second if anybody has any questions. Okay, so the responsibility of the committee as a whole is to, of course, examine the student's work, to meet and make a final determination of the acceptability of the thesis, project, and dissertation. And if your department requires an oral defense, then, you know, to arrange for the oral defense, you know, in accordance with your department's policies. So not all departments require an oral defense, but if you do, then that's, you know, that's part of the committee responsibility, is to ensure that that there's a date for the oral defense, and that, you know, the committee as a whole is arranging for that. Okay, those are 2 of my thesis students from a long time ago. Let's see, so publication of the thesis. So you guys are probably familiar with ScholarWorks. Is there anybody who's not familiar with ScholarWorks? It's the, you know, sort of repository where theses go. So that's where theses get uploaded when they're finished. And so they, you know, all of the theses that are produced at CSUSB are in ScholarWorks. And so you could search any student who wrote a thesis at CSUSB and find it in the ScholarWorks database. So yeah, so all theses, projects, and dissertations are made available to the public through ScholarWorks. Theses can be withheld for publication for up to 1 calendar year with approval of the graduate dean. So there might be certain reasons that a student might want to withhold information. So, you know, they might not want to disclose the content of the thesis. Maybe they have a business opportunity. Maybe they have the opportunity to patent, you know, whatever it is they're doing. You know, maybe there's a book coming out. I mean, who knows? So there could be some reason for withholding publication. So we allow withholding for up to 1 calendar year. So the student needs to take responsibility to observe deadlines for submission of final publication copies of the manuscript. So they've got to be sure that they get their manuscript in by the stated deadlines in the Office of Graduate Studies. If they don't, then, you know, their thesis won't be published that term, and that would actually mean that they have to do continuous enrollment or something like that for another term, because you have to be enrolled to graduate, and you can't graduate until the thesis is submitted. So they've got to make sure they stay on top of those deadlines. And also they are responsible for submitting revisions to committee members in a reasonable amount of time. So again, they shouldn't have more than a 4-week turnaround. So if you give them feedback, you should expect to get something back from them within a 4-week time period. Beyond 4 weeks, and it's getting to be excessive. All right, any questions at this point?
I did have a question with the ScholarWorks. Could you clarify, how does that work if they're also planning to publish in a journal? Is there any conflict with that? I know a lot of, obviously when you're submitting for a journal publication, they ask, has this been published in any form elsewhere? And the right answer is no. So how does that work with publishing in ScholarWorks?
Well, one of the things that you can do with ScholarWorks is give restricted access. So only members of the campus community would be able to see the thesis. And so that's one solution if they're publishing in a journal. I mean, I would always recommend that they stay in communication with the journal itself to ask about any requirements they may have and disclose that they are required to publish on ScholarWorks. And what would that mean in terms of the journal's policies. But typically, students will publish in journals, and they might, if it's, I mean, a lot of times the thesis isn't the exact document that's published in a journal. So if that's the case, then you're not publishing exactly the same document. So it's it's a different, it's something that's based on the thesis, but it's not the thesis. In some cases, it might actually be the thesis, and in that case, I would recommend restricted access on ScholarWorks. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Sure, but I would definitely encourage the student to communicate with the individual journal, and make sure that they're adhering to their policies. Okay. All right, so moving right along. So the chairperson then has, the responsibility to really set up the schedule. So they're kind of working with the student to arrive at an agreement on an approximate schedule. So this would include meetings of the committee each semester. So, the chairperson would sort of organize, coordinate the committee members and the student, making sure that, that this is a schedule that works for everybody involved. They also take the primary responsibility for supervision of the students' work, including, like I said, setting the deadlines, but also guiding the students' progress. So the chairperson is really the one who's making sure that the student is staying on task. And then the chairperson needs to make sure that all committee members obviously know what the schedule is, what's been agreed on, and that the committee members, can work with that schedule. So yeah, the chairperson is doing a lot of that sort of administrative coordinating. There's Nicole Dabb. She's the chair of the IRB. So I put her picture up because she right now is representing the IRB. So, so yeah, the chairperson also needs to communicate with the student any requirements for IRB or IACUC approval. So IRB being the body that reviews research involving human participants, and IACUC being the board that reviews any research involving animals. So yeah, so the chair would ensure that the IRB and IACUC policies are followed, and the chair, the IRB decided the chair of the committee should serve as the principal investigator on the IRB protocol. So, the chair will be the principal investigator on the IRB protocol. So that means not co-principal investigator, but the actual principal investigator. And then the student would be the co-principal investigator. So that's true for both IRB and IACUC protocols. So, but it's important to note that the role of the PI or principal investigator on an IRB or IACUC protocol is distinct from authorship. The student must be the sole author of the thesis. It's a requirement in Title V, California Code of Regulations for Education, that the student has to be the sole author of the master's thesis. There are some programs like social work. I think there was somebody here from social work that do joint theses. And that's, you know, that's okay. That's an exception that can be made, that the students work together on a thesis. And then they become co-authors on that thesis. But, you know, the student can't co-author a thesis with a faculty member. Okay, so agreements between students and faculty members around authorship and ownership of the data pertaining to that thesis topic should be completed at the time of proposal acceptance or as soon as possible thereafter. So there are a lot of situations where faculty members expect to publish with the student after the thesis has been submitted. So any agreements about authorship, you know, on subsequent publications based on that thesis should be made as early as possible in the process to avoid any sort of disputes, so that that agreement is very clear. In a few weeks, I think it's like first week in October, Ryan Keating and I are going to talk about publishing with students. And so we'll talk more about this process, including sharing you know, a template form with you that you could use in making authorship agreements. And the same goes for ownership of data, because a lot of times, you know, students are working in a lab with a faculty member, and, you know, that faculty member has certain rights to that data. So we want to be sure as early as possible in the process that the student and the faculty member have made agreements when it comes to ownership of data. And that's another form that we're developing. I'll work with grad council this year to develop, you know, a template form that departments could use to make agreements about ownership of data. Okay, any questions about any of that? Okay, so the chair shall inform the student of university regulations when it comes to the need to maintain continuous enrollment while working on the thesis project or dissertation. So often students will take their thesis course, they'll exhaust those units, but they're not finished with the thesis. So in that case, they need to enroll in continuous enrollment because graduate students have to maintain enrollment. They can't sort of stop out. And then they have to be enrolled in order to graduate. So one of the possibilities that people often use is the 0 unit policy for continuous enrollment, either stateside or through the College of Extended and Global Education. If they do continuous enrollment through CG, then it's $320 flat for the semester. If they do it stateside, they're going to be paying part-time tuition. So it's a huge difference in cost. But in some cases, students might need to actually go stateside because of their financial aid requirements. So, you know, you'd have to work with the individual student to see what would make the most sense. But they need to maintain continuous enrollment. So yeah, so then the chair also needs to inform the student of the university's guidelines for thesis preparation, which are on the Office of Graduate Studies website and maintained by Shelby Reeder in the Office of Graduate Studies. Also encourage attendance at a thesis workshop as early as possible in the student's thesis process. So Shelby Reeder in the Office of Graduate Studies gives thesis workshops periodically throughout the academic year. And those dates are always listed on our website. So make sure that students know where to find those dates and that they actually attend those workshops, because it will save them a lot of time in the end if they know sort of what the process is, what the expectations for formatting are, and that sort of thing. Okay, and then the chairperson should also make sure the student is familiar with the style manual or journal style that's required by the department. So, you know, that's the chairperson. So of course, different disciplines have different style manuals. And so the chairperson should make sure that the student is adhering to the requirements laid out by the department. Okay. All right. So the chairperson is the one who determines the final grade on the thesis project or dissertation, and then also sees that it's reported to the Office of the Registrar. So the chairperson is responsible for determining the final grade, of course, in consultation with the other committee members, and then reporting that to the Office of the Registrar. Yeah, and also the thesis chair is responsible for evaluating the student's progress before assigning the grade. So an RP is automatically assigned, and that means that the student is making progress. If the student is not making progress, then an I, an incomplete grade, should be assigned. Okay, so what if we need to fill vacancies or make replacements? So, so if the chairperson is absent, you know, it could be an unexpected absence, or it could be due to something planned like a sabbatical or retirement. When the student completes the thesis project or dissertation, then the department chair can act for the committee chair. But a change in committee chair requires a letter of justification from the department chair. So the department chair should justify why a committee chair is being changed. And then faculty members who are replaced must be informed by the committee chair. So you can't just replace, you know, a faculty member without them knowing it. All right, and disputes. Every once in a while we get disputes between either students and a member of the committee, or between members of the committee, you know, prior to the issuance of the grade while the thesis is in progress. So these are kind of the steps if there is a dispute. So the first step is for the committee chairperson to call a meeting of the committee and the student for the purpose of resolving the problem. And hopefully the problem gets resolved there, right? So if it can't be resolved through one, then that's when you might request that the graduate committee look at the problem. So they review the problem and they recommend a solution. So if it can't be resolved within the immediate committee, then the department graduate committee might look at the problem and recommend a solution. If it can't be resolved through either of those, then the dispute should be appealed to the college or school dean, and that's the final level of appeal. So whatever the college or school dean decides is what the solution will be. So if the dispute is pertaining to the final grade, then the student should adhere to the academic grievance procedures outlined in FAM 803.65. Okay, does that make sense? All right, great, moving right along. So the committee gets terminated when the final manuscript has been approved by the graduate dean. So this is like graduation, yay, they're done, right? Each member has signed the approval page for publication copy and the grade is recorded. So if a student fails to maintain active status within one semester or term after official acceptance by a thesis project or dissertation committee, the committee chairperson has the option of dissolving the committee, and then a new committee would have to be secured before registration could be authorized. So if the student sort of just drops out and disappears, then the chairperson has the option of dissolving that committee, and then the student would have to reform a committee when they return. Okay, does that make sense? All right, if the student needs to suspend work, you know, for educational reasons acceptable to the committee and the committee chairperson, then the student should obtain a planned educational leave of absence. So that's really important. So graduate students can't just stop out in the same way that undergraduate students can. If they need to take a leave, they need to do it prior to that period where they're going to be absent. So these leaves can be approved to 2 to 4 semesters. You know, well, they could be approved for 1 semester. Actually, I don't know why it says 2 to 4, 1 to 4 semesters. So if the leave is approved, then the committee is expected to continue its existence until the student returns. Okay. And then finally, you know, again, on the subject of authorship and data agreements, so we encourage development of formal written agreements pertaining to peer-reviewed publications on the topic of the thesis project or dissertation after submission of that document for degree completion. So that formal written agreement should determine authorship and authorship order. And we do have a template form. Ryan Keating and I will be presenting that in a couple of weeks. And if any of you want that, I can send it to you. So just let me know, just send me an email. Let's see. So yeah, and you should also develop formal written agreements pertaining to rights and access of data used for the purpose of the thesis, project, or dissertation. That's a form that we're in the process of developing. So when that is completed, I'll let the campus community know. So these, again, formal written agreements should be completed as soon as possible in the thesis, dissertation, or thesis, project, or dissertation process. Really at the proposal stage is the best. So that's all I have to say about the thesis policy and guidelines that we developed last academic year. Do you guys have any questions or comments? I'm going to stop sharing my screen. I can share it again if you guys need me to, but let's see. I need to try to end my show. Stop share. There we go. I'm back.
Okay, you know me, I always have questions for you. With the pandemic right now, is it mandatory for students to do a major presentation, or the committee member and the students can do a Zoom and we can graduate the student? Just clarity.
Yeah, so the oral defense, I think, is what you're talking about.
Yeah.
We don't. The university does not require the oral defense, so that would be a program specific requirement.
Okay.
So then I would encourage you guys to make, some sort of contingency plan for, right now. Obviously, we're going to be virtual for spring too, so it's going to be a long haul. That you would allow Zoom defenses.
Okay, and it's just the committee members and the student can meet. We don't have to extend beyond that if we want to, right?
No, you don't have to. And that's completely a programmatic decision that your grad committee and your program can make.
Okay, sounds good. Okay. Okay, thank you.
Could I just ask, are you going to send out a copy of this presentation?
Yes, I can. I can send it to you on the email.
Great, that would be great. Thank you.
You're welcome. All right, and I'm recording this too. So some people have asked because they couldn't attend today. They asked for a recording. All right, any other questions? All right, well, if you think of any questions, feel free to contact me. I think I sent in the email this morning a link to the document, the thesis, project, dissertation committee policy and guidelines. So, you can look through that on your own time. And if you don't know how to get to it, just let me know. It's on the Office of Graduate Studies website under Graduate Coordinator Resources. But if you have trouble finding it, just let me know and I'll send it along to you. All right. Any other questions, comments, complaints?
No, thank you.
Well, thank you so much for coming, you guys. And, hopefully we can get this information disseminated. It's the first time at CSUSB that we've had policy and guidelines like this. Other campuses do have them. I leaned heavily on Fresno State with the permission of the graduate dean there to sort of mirror their policy and guidelines. So, I think it's helpful to have. And, hopefully there are never disputes, but in the case that there are, we have, some guidelines in place to help people resolve those things, or hopefully not get into them in the first place. So that's the best hope. All right. Okay, if there are no other questions, no other comments, then I will close the meeting. And thank you very much for coming. Have a great one.